Okay, hi everyone. So what I intend to do is to give you a brief update on a project we are running, which we call the BioVentureHub. And this is basically an initiative that aims at trying to move biotechs, academia, investors, and industry in a closer vicinity to each other. And it is basically about introducing, you could say it's about introducing a new business model in pharma. So we have done a lot of experiments in order to how to increase our efficiency, and not all of that has perhaps been successful, but we have experimented very, very little with how we actually do business with each other. And this is what this is about. So my background is business development. I have worked with basically M&As and in licensing for the last 10 years, and we have seen tons of biotech companies, and we have seen quite a depressing trend in how the capital markets are forcing the companies to become leaner and leaner and do things in a leaner and leaner fashion. And that often results in that when they come to us, there are some significant deficiencies, especially when they move into the clinic. And this is the background to this program. So today, you can basically move in the value chain being basically totally virtual. 400,000 people has left Big Pharma since year 2000, and many of them have set up and work in organizations that support this value chain. So these are very, very skillful organizations. They often do things even better than we do these days, but they are very, very focused on one thing. So what we have noticed is that, for example, if we take CMC, the formulation and the production of what you do, we often see that if we look on an asset which is in phase 2, that the data is okay. It validates the hypothesis, it shows it works, but we as Big Pharma can't use the data because it is perhaps made with a simple capsule formulation, and we can't use that data in our discussions with FDA and EMEA about doing phase 3. So we have to restart the program. The worst consequence of that is not that we have to spend the same amount of money twice, but it costs time. And we lose perhaps 2-3 years on exclusivity in the end of the product, which is quite a bad impact on the net present value of that asset. The other area where we often see deficiencies is in the combination of the clinical trial design together with insights on the commercial situation, and not the commercial situation today, but rather what it will look like when this product launch, and combined with what we can call the regulatory reality. So we do clinical trials very, very differently these days than we did just a couple of years ago. In oncology, for example, we try to skip phase 2. We move directly from phase 1 into phase 3, which means that what we do in phase 1 is not the same as FDA tells you you need to do. We do it in a very different way these days. The final area where we often find flaws is in the IP strategy. It's often too early, too broad, and companies often constitute prior art for themselves. So what we asked ourselves, what can we do about this? And if you think about it, this value chain is quite interesting in the sense that today a US university basically receives 70% of their funding from collaborations. If you are an investor, and we have some here today, they have in their business cases an aspiration to make 10x in the middle of the value chain, when we still don't know whether the product works, and we know there is still a couple of $100 million to be invested in phase 3 trials and launch activities. We can't tell universities to fund themselves differently. We can't tell investors to lower their expectations, because then they will go elsewhere. But what we can do is to lower the cost of what it takes to go through this value chain. And we could perhaps try to lower the risk that goes with these activities. If you are a small company, if you have competence, capital, capabilities, and a good idea, you can often be successful. The challenge is that the definition of a good idea is very different depending on who you talk to. And these companies, if they are early, they are often very skilled in what they do, if they are, for example, in the preclinical phase, but they lack insights about what it takes to become a company that is operating in development. And if you believe there is a connection between what you do today and what you need to do tomorrow, that is a weakness of the way the system works these days. So we asked ourselves, if we look on all the assets and all the knowledge that actually resides in Big Pharma, could we utilize that resource pool in a different way to achieve a lowering of cost and a reduction of risk? So what this is about is basically to open up so that academic groups and small companies can tap into the infrastructure we have built up as an industry and allow them to tap into the human capital that we have. And the focus is, when it comes to companies, is really not startups. There is a system for startups all over the world these days. The problem is later on. So we are really trying to focus this on companies that are facing the challenges that goes with moving into development. When it comes to academic groups, it's quite interesting. Normally, when we as industry approach academia, we go there because we have a problem and we see that there is a specific group that perhaps could help us to solve that problem. What we have done here is rather different. And I will give you an example. We sit as an organization on some 800 plus phenotype knockouts. And if we go to a university group and say, if you get access to these models, what type of science could we do jointly? And you end up in a very, very different discussion compared to, we have a problem, what can you do to help us? So we want to move also academic groups into this environment to utilize what we have built up. As I said, the sweet spot for this activity is not startup companies. It's companies that face the phase where they suddenly need 10 times as much money and they need very different sets of skills. Not much has been done about this valley of death. Everybody talks about it, and we all know what the problems are, but there has been few solutions provided regarding what we actually could do to try to make it a bit easier. So what we have done, we have made an inventory of all of our capabilities, both tangible and non-tangible ones. So we have basically mapped out what models do we have, what skill sets, what processes, etc., etc. And then asked ourselves, which of these could we in theory use in a system like this? Some is not possible to use. It could be because we don't want them to be known to the outside world. It could be that we have third-party agreements which prohibits us to use them. But the majority of these processes and these skills and these assets could actually be used if we just think in a different way. Besides this, so if this is about covering our expertise in development and from industry, we have also entered a strategic collaboration with two other important parts of this ecosystem. And one is the clinical trial capacity that resides in Gothia Forum. And we have Kai here today if you want to ask him more about this. But basically what this is, that all the capacity that Gothia Forum has will be made available to companies that operate in this environment. And there will be some tweaks to it, so it's basically it has to be 1 + 1 is more than 2. And I won't go into those details. The other organization we have aligned is SPPD, and that is Statens Tekniska Institute, so it's a governmental organization that has as a mission to strengthen Swedish competitiveness in high-tech areas, and life sciences is one of those. They acquired AstraZeneca's process R&D capabilities in Södertälje. So they will provide basically free access to their expertise when it comes to scale-up chemistry and process development to these companies who sit here. The third leg of this is the investor community. Big Pharma sits on loads of assets which sometimes is not easy to access because we don't want to divest them, simply because it's too cumbersome for us. But since this aims at building an environment where these companies can operate in very close vicinity to where this project actually was born, we will allow investors to basically build companies using AZ assets in this environment, or even move in their own assets into this environment, because our framework here is cost neutrality. We don't charge anything to make a revenue of what we do here. So we simply look on what is the actual cost for AstraZeneca of doing this. And that is what we want to have covered. We will have no interest in the activity that goes on. So there is no legal ties between us and the company, but for a rental contract and a confidentiality agreement. So no first right of refusal, no first right to negotiate or anything. In practice, the way it works is that we have divided this into basically 3 different domains. The first one is that you pay a rent to move into labs at our site here in Mölndal. You get access to everything what we have as AZ employees at the site. You also get access to our senior people as speaking partners. So we try to tell our people that we want you to do this, and this is a nice balance between how much can we actually provide and where does it suddenly become more of a collaboration. Here we are asking for actually governmental funding so that the innovation system actually can reimburse AstraZeneca for the time our expertise spends with these companies. The difference is that this is expertise which you sometimes even can't acquire if you are a small organization, because it's not available out there. The other part is what we say access to AZ infrastructure. We have set up robotics for screening, for cardiac safety assessment, for compound profiling, you name it. We run tons of compounds through these systems every day. And we could, in theory, add your compound into that system and you pay the actual cost for it, which means that it will be very, very much cheaper than it is if you go to a CRO somewhere else, or even multiple CROs to do the same thing. On the last bucket, this is more moving into business development. So in some cases where we actually have an interest in what is going on, we would be willing to invest in the company, but not like we do today, perhaps, where we often try to buy some kind of an option to a program if it is too early. Here we rather say that we want to invest with resources. We still don't take ownership. We only want to have cost coverage. But here we believe we will add a significant value, so we will actually ask for an upside in case the company is successful in the end. When it comes to assets, we have for many, many years tried to open up and use our compound collection in collaboration with smaller companies. The compound collection is perhaps one of the most valuable assets we have as an industry, besides products and human capital. We can't use it because the opportunity cost of using it is too high. If you are a company and want to make your journey through discovery and onwards, you need access to loads of compounds to find the one you are interested in. And we can't provide that exclusivity because, again, the opportunity cost for us is too high. In this setting, since you operate in our environment, we are looking into means to provide a non-exclusive, no rights to commercialize license. And this basically means that you can do the journey, and once you know that the compound actually has a value, we will give you the license. Because now the opportunity cost is gone. And for us, suddenly we have extracted value out of that compound rather than just having it sitting on the shelf. And I think these compound collections, the way industry has used them and nursed them, means that many, many compounds, we have full insight into the history of a compound. So when you get a hit, you will actually know whether that compound has turned out to be högaktiv or bad cacopermeability or what have you. So I think this is of immense value to a smaller company. So we are in discussing with the innovation system to get funding to cover the cost in order to keep it at the very, very low cost for the companies. So we actually want Vinnova, which is a Swedish governmental-run investment body to support early SMEs, to ship in capital here so we can increase the density of the support we can provide. This is our site here in Mölndal, and we have chosen to locate this project in the very heart of our site. So this is the main entrance down here. And here we have the canteen and all the conference facilities. And we are taking the top floor of these 3 buildings. And it can basically, we have had some 300 people sitting there. And with biotech measures, I think we can squeeze in more. We will equip these labs with all instruments that is needed because we have it in surplus since we closed Södertälje and Lund. So you will basically move into a lab which has all the infrastructure that we used to have when we had similar type of labs in Södertälje and Lund, and we will pay for that. You will actually just pay the running cost of using these instruments. There are service providers like, I will give you one example, Eppendorf, the German company, and I think if you work in a lab, you know what they are. they will equip this with all of their instruments for free. So you can tap into that, not AstraZeneca, but the small companies. So I think there is a lot of interest to support this initiative because it could, in theory, add a lot of value to the way we work as an industry today. And this is where I want to end. So to summarize, it's about providing access to our processes and our built-up infrastructure. It is about providing access to our expertise and also our assets. We do that in collaboration with two very important partners. It's clinical trial capacity of Sahlgrenska and process R&D chemistry in SP. We want to mix small companies with academic groups. We are not forcing or saying that you need to be aligned to our strategy, because we know we change that quite frequently these days. We won't let anybody come in here just because it's cheap. We think that we need to attract top-notch quality science, otherwise I think this will die. So it's not a hotel for companies who want a cheap rent. It's a place to be if you have really sexy science, basically. And we are in discussions with capital networks. So far we have mainly spoken to Sunstone Capital and Novo Seeds and Industrifonden, and we will speak to others because we think we can line up investors, and I think they will find benefits in placing or building companies in this environment. But that is currently not the focus. The focus now is to get the infrastructure in place and get the governmental funding in place. And with that, I will actually end. I think this, what I like about this is that there are no losers here. It's a win-win for everyone involved. And it really targets the sweet spot of where we have problems these days. And with that, thank you.
Magnus, I will just allow one question, if there is one. Okay, one.
Shane, you're not allowed. You're from AstraZeneca.
Yeah, you're not allowed.
Thank you, Magnus, for a splendid presentation. I'm interested in the AZ expertise part of it.
Yeah.
And that expertise is usually working flat out, and it's difficult to get their attention when you're in AZ. So how do you motivate them to work? And it's great, it's a great idea. How do you motivate them?
So when we talk about certain capabilities, and we can take one which I think is really scarce, which is IP support, for example. Here we intend actually to line up outside IP councils, which will do as we do. They will provide services actually for free. When it comes to our development resources, this is based upon the fact that you can tap into the resources when they're actually available. So we can't do this on the expense of our internal priorities. But if we get the governmental funding we are asking for, it is basically about adding FTEs, Shane. So that's how it will be very dependent on whether we get that financing or not. But it won't be like if you call a CRO, because we will not want to become a CRO for sure. And ask for a resource, it could well be that we say, you can't get that next week, you have to wait 2 months. Then it is available at this cost. So it will require different type of planning of your activities. If you want to use our resource, you are still free to buy your resource wherever you want, of course. I hope that it's a good question and it's a tricky one.
Okay, you will have to ask that to Magnus later.